Hello F1 fans, welcome back to the F1 Masters podcast brought to you by AUBG Daily. As usual, you're with me, David and Harry, and today we'll discuss and analyze the already complete 2023 Formula 1 season. Every one of us made his own power ranking and we combined it in one big power ranking of the 22 pilots that compete throughout the whole F1 season. And let's not wait anymore. Let's start from the 22nd place, and we have all chosen only one pilot, and that is Nick De Vries. He couldn't deliver, and we know that in the Red Bull family this will cost your head, and he was out after I think 10 races, about 10 races, and that is why it is our 22nd place. Moving on to the 21st.
Yeah, in 21st place, also a unanimous decision from the three of us. We had Logan Sargent, really unimpressive season, scored 1 point across the whole season. Somehow got his contract renewed with Williams, which I personally think was a mistake by them. And at the end of the day, just no race really stood out. Even when he got 1 point, still not impressive. He got destroyed by Alex Albon.
I think they only renewed his contract because of marketing reasons, because when you have a US pilot, that is perfect for your marketing. They probably know, Williams, that they're not going to be competitive once again, and it is better for their brand to have a pilot like that. He's not the best, but he gives them that marketing competitiveness. Moving on to the 20th place.
20th place goes to Kevin Magnussen, who two of us voted to be in 20th place, and I think that it is a fair ranking, as he didn't impress really during the season. He was outperformed by his teammate Nico Hülkenberg, and overall it was a season to forget for him.
Also for us, I think.
Moving on to our 19th position, we have Daniel Ricciardo, who came in halfway through the season to replace Nick De Vries. Overall, he had a really good 7th place in Mexico, but apart from that, didn't score any points for the rest of the season. But considering that not only did he join halfway through the season and he broke his hand midway through the season, he had some pretty impressive performances, to say the least.
I think we can wait for his next season, because if AlphaTauri have a bit more competitive car, he is going to be competitive throughout the whole season. I like how he is in that car, how he is competing, and I can't wait for the next season, because I think there is more to come from Daniel Ricciardo. We just need to wait. Moving on to the 18th place, and this is Zhou Guanyu, who was pretty mediocre throughout the whole season, as was the car of Alfa Romeo. So I don't think there is anything really interesting to say. He will most probably be in that second seat at Alfa Romeo for the next season. But again, nothing interesting for the team that is moving on to their old name, Sauber, in the next season. And 17th place.
17th place goes to Liam Lawson, even though some of us were we had different opinions of his placement. For example, David said 20th, I said 17th, Vasco said 13th, but I think that overall he managed to fit in quite well in the AlphaTauri seat for the few races that he got. He maybe deserved a seat for the next season, but that's how F1 goes. There can be seats for everyone. So
yeah, just to justify my position, even though I was really impressed by Liam Lawson, and if you listen to some of these episodes, you'd know that I wanted this man to have a seat next season, but he just didn't have enough races, in my opinion, to have a clear, sample size to base him against the other drivers, which is why I personally put him lower. And also because Daniel Ricciardo, he had a better points finish compared to Liam Lawson, which is why I put him above Liam Lawson as well.
I think 13th is the place for Liam Lawson, because in his only 4 races without preseason, without competing previously in a race, he was really competitive in that car and he showed his talent. So that is why I think he deserves a seat. I don't know where, but he deserves a seat. And we saw in only 4 races something truly impressive for him. But moving on, above him we put Valtteri Bottas on 16th position. And again, a bit mediocre season from Valtteri, but he had some glimpses of an alright performances, I can say, throughout the season. That Alfa Romeo was really not competitive, and in the second part of the season even less competitive than the first 3-4 races of the season, and I think it's reasonable for Valtteri to be put in 16th.
Moving on to 15th position, this is the first driver from a quicker team that we have. It is Lance Stroll, who, has to be said, had a disappointing season, especially compared to his teammate. Fernando Alonso completely crushed him throughout the season. Alonso got the team's 8 podiums, Stroll got 0. He had, I believe, 3 top 5 finishes. 2 of them were in the last 3 races, which really kind of salvaged his season. But overall, just not enough from Lance Stroll, especially for a team that was fighting at the front at the start of the season.
I like Lance, but he's continuing with these poor performances throughout the whole season. His qualifying speed is not at the best level, and throughout the whole season we didn't see anything from him, so I think it's reasonable, 15th place.
Yeah, I can agree about Lance Stroll. And moving on to 14th place, the man who finished P2 in the Drivers' Championship, it's Sergio Perez, who we know had a really disappointing season, and we can all agree that this was really just, he was not even close to Max Verstappen. He was 290 points behind him, and he had so many appalling performances that it is deserved.
I think when you make this kind of power rankings, the most important thing is how you compared with your teammate throughout the whole season. And apart from these 2 wins, Checo didn't seem to be at the same level as Max throughout the whole season, talking about qualifying speed, talking about performances throughout the race, how he worked with his tires and overall competitiveness. And that is why I think if it was any other more competitive pilot, he would have been at least a bit closer to Max, because I think even though he was second, 285 points are disappointing result.
Yeah, just to add on that, I mean, very disappointing from Sergio Perez, and if he finds himself, I guess, at the end of next season's rankings in a similar position, I think it'll be clear that he will not be re-signed by Red Bull if he continues performing like this. He did secure second in the championship, but he still needs to be closer to Max.
The future will tell us. The next season is only like 85-90 days apart from us, so we keep waiting for it. And 13th place, the lucky number 13, Nico Hülkenberg, and I put him on 12th spot because I think he had some great performances, especially in qualifying sessions. That Haas car was not competitive throughout the whole season, and he had some great results. I think he deserves a praise at that slow of a car. He had great performances.
Yeah, to follow on that, Nico Hülkenberg was really good, especially in qualifying, and it was a shame that that Haas car had no race pace and was terrible on its tires, because judging by their qualifying performances, they could have been maybe even close to Alpine if they had the same race pace as they did in qualifying, but they would just fall off in the first few laps and create trains behind them, and people would go by them one by one. And it was a shame because Nico Hülkenberg, first season back, we have to mention, after leaving F1, pretty impressive, I would say, from him.
Yeah, and he deserves his spot for the next season.
And the 12th spot goes to Esteban Ocon, who was outperformed by his teammate Pierre Gasly and was behind him in the championship. And I think it is a deserved one, as he had his bad moments. For example, multiple penalties in one race is not is not gonna boost him his rankings. So,
well, he had 7 DNFs or DNSs throughout the whole season, which is pretty impressive, but in a bad way. And Esteban was not that bad throughout the whole season, and he wasn't beaten like seriously in the points from Pierre Gasly, but he needs to do something about these penalties, about his DNFs, because there is certainly a big talent in him. He just needs to unleash it, and if him and Pierre step up the next season and Alpine have a bit more competitive car, I think that team has a great future. I have said it throughout the whole season that Alpine have much more in them. They just need to unleash that potential that's in the team, and that starts from Esteban and his shaky performances.
I agree. Esteban Ocon, really just an okay season. He loses too many points with his DNFs. Of course, some of that can be down to engine failures, because we know that Renault engine is terrible. But overall, a season, I guess, to forget for him. It was pretty average. But moving on to number 11, and maybe it might be controversial for some, but it is George Russell. And George Russell, he had a worse season compared to last year. Didn't get a win, only 2 podiums across the whole season, and didn't even get his second one until the very last race. He was running comfortably 8th in the standings for most of the season and wasn't even close to anyone in front of him in the standings. So really kind of an, I guess, isolated season for George Russell, we could say.
We saw a lot of races during this season where George was isolated, like 20-second gap from the person in front of him and from the person behind him, and he just didn't step up during this season. And if Mercedes have more competitive car next season, he'll need to step up his game, because that wasn't his best season, and throughout, especially in the middle of the season, throughout it, he wasn't impressive at all with these mediocre performances. So I think it's deserved, or I think he even deserved lower place, but that is our combined power ranking. Entering the top 10, this is Yuki Tsunoda, who we put on the 10th position.
Yes, I can say that he has improved since his last season, and he has beat comfortably like all of the teammates that passed in the second car in AlphaTauri, and I think that he deservedly gets in the top 10, and I hope that he continues like that in the future with the Racing Bulls team.
Yuki Tsunoda, I usually don't really rate him as that great of a driver, so I find it weird how we've gotten him in the top 10. But I guess the second half of the season, especially when that car came alive, Yuki took advantage of it, racked up a total of 17 points throughout the season, and almost caught up to Williams single-handedly, which was very impressive, and I think at the end of the day justified his seat next year at, well, maybe not AlphaTauri, but whatever the team name is next year.
But Yuki managed to capitalize on his great moments throughout the season. And somebody else who managed to capitalize on some of his great moments, Pierre Gasly, who we put on 9th, and all the 3 of us put him on 9th. So I think there is no disagreement. Great season for Pierre. He felt comfortable in that Alpine car. Let's move on to the 8th place. Or do you have anything to say about Pierre?
I mean, overall, first season in Alpine, beats his teammate, scored a podium as well in the process, let's not forget. I think he really proved himself and proved that he is one of the better drivers in F1. But moving on to 8th place, all 3 of us also put this driver in 8th place, and that was Oscar Piastri, the rookie. I mean, just what a season. 2 podiums, but also we had a sprint win in Qatar, and even though Lando outscored him comfortably, considering the fact that Oscar is a rookie, I mean, very impressive, especially when that McLaren became extremely competitive.
Yes, I can agree completely with that. And moving on to 7th place, it's Carlos Sainz, the man who finished 7th in the championship as well. It was a really poor weekend in Abu Dhabi for him, and he was 4th before the weekend, but then he just fell down because of the crash in practice and everything. And I think that, yeah, it was he could have done better. He was really close to Leclerc, and yeah, what do you think?
I would just like to say, though, that overall, Carlos Sainz's season was pretty good. He was the only non-Red Bull driver to get a win, let's keep that in mind, and also was ahead of Leclerc pretty much the whole season until that final race in Abu Dhabi in the standings. Maybe a little bit of misfortune, but I think Carlos Sainz should be proud of this season, considering, I guess, how big the gap was to Leclerc last season compared to this season.
Moving on to number 6, Mr. The Best of the Rest, Alex Albon, with 27 points in Williams. That was alright, but not particularly sharp throughout the season. I think deservedly 6th place. Alex Albon redeemed his older reputation after his spell at Red Bull, and if he continues like that, I think some of the big teams will knock on his door sooner or later.
Yes, I can see that coming as well. And moving on, in 5th place we have Charles Leclerc, who had a good season. I would say there were like a few retirements which cost him points, and nevertheless, I think he did pretty well when he was supposed to.
Yes, Charles Leclerc was doing pretty poorly actually halfway through the season. He was doing okay, but for his standards, it should have been way better. And really, towards the end of the season, he really revamped his results. I mean, grabbing podium after podium. He was qualifying on the front row and on pole position every race, it seemed like. And he had 2 races where he didn't even... He had a disqualification and he had a race where he didn't start and still managed to climb up to 5th in the standings, joint points with Alonso. I think Charles had a good season, could have been better. Maybe if he had a bit more luck with his retirements, because he had quite a few retirements, he could have been even further up in the standings.
I really think we should praise his qualifying pace, and overall he showed his talent during the season, but I think there is still some things to improve if he wants to be championship contender at some point in the future. Number 4, just before the podium places Lando Norris, and we all agreed that he should be on that 4th position. Lando, he couldn't get that much desired win of his, but he had 7 podiums, and after the big upgrades at McLaren, I think he changed the course of his season, and he showed once again to everybody that he is very special talent, and in the right car he can do miracles.
Yes, I agree. Even though he didn't get that elusive win, which he was so close to, especially at Singapore, racked up 7 podiums, which was more than Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc. What a season for him, maybe even his best in his career, and he was 1 point away from 4th place. I mean, considering the start of the season for that McLaren, to rack up as many points as he did, and at one point to be a regular podium finisher, was extremely impressive, and I think he really proved his potential that he could fight for world championships.
Well, he's the team leader now, so he proved it.
And in 3rd place, the first one of the podium places, we have Fernando Alonso, who, as we know, in the beginning of the season racked up a lot of podiums. Then the car was not developed enough and it fell down the order, but still, Fernando was pulling off some amazing performances in almost every race. And what do you think?
Yeah, he reminded us why he's a 2-time world champion. Incredible drives, especially at the start of the season. He racked up so many points and podiums in an Aston Martin. That was totally unheard of before the start of the season. Even though the car lost pace throughout the season, still, the podium in Brazil, for example, was another great representation of Alonso's skill and talent, and I think this season was really almost a renaissance for him.
Aging like fine wine, that's what I can say for Fernando, and that's what I can say for number 2, and this is Lewis Hamilton, who proved us once again what a special talent he is. With 6 podiums throughout the year, he had even 1 pole position, 3rd place in the standings. Even at some point he was knocking at the door of that 2nd place for Sergio Perez. Although Mercedes, they were not great throughout the season, we saw that Hamilton is amazing and he can take everything and even more from the car that he is driving.
Yes, I can absolutely agree. It was an impressive season for Lewis, and I hope he continues that way in 2024.
Lewis was phenomenal this year, better than last year, even though he was quite unlucky last year at times. This year, super consistent, just constantly fighting at the front. Even though he had some poor results to end the season, he was comfortably 3rd throughout the majority of the season, and to fight arguably the greatest car ever made, that Red Bull, and to potentially split the 2 teammates in the driver's standings would have been a miracle if he pulled it off. Even though he didn't, we can't deny the incredible season Lewis has had.
Well, we can say if Mercedes have once again championship contending car, he would be up there. But we know who was up there throughout the whole season. 19 wins, 21 podiums, 12 pole positions. He had 0 DNFs and he completed every lap throughout this season. Probably the most dominant season in the history of F1. And we can all agree that Max Verstappen deserves that top spot in our ranking. Amazing season. We haven't seen anything like that. Even in Schumacher era, even in Lewis Hamilton era, that season was monstrous, and Max showed us that he is up there. He can be one of the GOATs one day.
Yes, I think he's he's already knocking on the door. Maybe he's even in the top 5. I would have to think about it, but he has just achieved the most dominant individual season we've ever witnessed. To win 19 races out of 22 is truly just unheard of, and he didn't even get pole position for 2/3 of those races, and yet still he managed to get wins. Even when his car didn't have such an edge over the field, he still found a way to win, and his relentless devotion to being the best in Formula One is truly inspiring in some ways, because I don't know any driver in history of F1 that is as ruthless as Max Verstappen.
Yeah, guys, you summed it up perfectly. I can't add anything else. And I guess we can finish off in here. This is all for today from us. We're looking forward to the next episode. Until then, like, subscribe, and follow us on AUBG Daily on Instagram and Facebook. And stay tuned for more of our content. Thank you, and remember,
if you no longer go for a gap that exists,
You're no longer a racing driver.